Welcome aboard. You're listening to FlightPlan Quick Consults, your go-to podcast for veterinary insights that are fast, focused, and designed to elevate your practice. I'm your host, Brenda Tassava Medina from Encore Veterinary Consulting. Whether you're between appointments or heading into a strategy session, we've got takeoff ready tips, tools, and takeaways to keep your team soaring. So buckle up and set a course for why your managers are drowning. Today's panel includes Debbie Hill, Susie Crockett, and Katie Esposito. Katie, tell our listeners a little about yourself.
Hi, all. So I'm Katie Esposito, and I have been in veterinary medicine for my entire life and started in the kennel and kind of worked my way up through the hospitals. In the process, got my MBA in CVPM and then went into regional operations for about 4 or 5 years and have recently joined a company called Claris Technology that is still in vet med, but on the software side. And did that because I see that we need some help in our industry in making access to care more accessible. And that the product is amazing, and I'm feeling very strongly about my decision to kind of come out of hospitals to do this. I live in Massachusetts with a dog and 4 cats. So that's me.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today. Next up is Susie Crockett.
Hi, I'm Susie Crockett. I am a proud Purdue grad. I have an organizational communication degree, and so I love to chat. So I'm very excited about today's podcast. I've been in vet med for a little over 25 years. I started as a CSR and kind of have gone through a lot of different positions here. I earned my CVPM in 2009, and I'm currently the Director of Practice Management for a group of independently owned hospitals in Indianapolis area where I oversee practice managers and operations for multiple disciplines of ER, specialty, GP, low cost.
Great. Thanks for being here today, Susie. And not to be missed, Debbie Hill.
I'm Debbie Hill. I'm a newly retired hospital administrator, and I have lived today's topic. I came into the profession like Susie as a receptionist before the cool titles and spent 37 years in veterinary management for small animal practices, most of those years with multiple practices. I've worked every phase from startup to selling, and the one thing I learned is that I needed capable people in the trenches. And so we hire them and we work them silly. So today's topic is spot on for me. While getting my CVPM and HR credentials, I taught management and communication for Patterson for 13 years and spoke nationally, helping practice managers and owners know that they're not alone. My practices shared the exact same struggles. My team's not any smarter than anybody else's. So when I tell you what we do and don't do, it's what we've done and don't do. But retirement means I've got a little more time on my hands, and so my brain is still swirling with all things management. And so I'm finding ways to share those experiences with consulting work, some curriculum, and side projects. I love all things management. I've seen what works, I've seen what doesn't. I want practices to succeed. And my personal mission is to share what I've learned with other practice managers and owners.
Well, thank you, Debbie. I'm excited about this panel because you come from management world, but you've also worked with managers in different capacities. So I think there's a lot of diversity, but I'm anxious to hear what y'all have to say. So my first burning question, and I'll pitch it to Katie first. What responsibilities are we piling onto practice managers that actively prevent them from leading?
So I feel like this is a loaded question because I think most of the things we put on the practice managers are preventing them from actively leading the team. There is a lot on their plate, going back to my management days. Something that paperwork altogether is what I will say. Admin, and some of the things I feel are not practice manager equipped are the HR issues we put on them. We put every single disciplinary action, good, bad, on our practice managers, and don't really give them the training usually to take care of those things, as well as we do all the accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll, inventory, you name it, and they do it. So it's a very loaded question because all of that takes them off of the floor 90% of the time, where they should be on the floor probably 90% of the time and in the office 10% of the time.
Yeah, yeah. I think the one thing, one of the things that I felt I never needed to do, but I was doing all the time was the bookkeeping.
Mm.
And when I moved to Indianapolis, that was one of the things that I was gifted was here's a bookkeeper. She's going to come in 2 mornings a week and she's going to produce all your P&Ls for you. And it was like such a gift because it did free up some of my time. What about you, Susie? What responsibilities do you see that we're piling on practice managers that prevents them from actually leading?
Yeah, and I love this topic because I agree. I've seen this in all of our practices. I currently see it in our practices, and then sometimes I feel guilty because sometimes I'm the one dumping. And I'm trying to be very conscious about this overloading without support concept that I've kind of grabbed onto. But it was a tough question. I mean, I understand because the practice managers do need to manage, so they do have to have all these other things on their plate. But similar to what Katie said, inventory ordering. Compliance paperwork and compliance issues, I think, is huge. Managers typically have to end up dealing with that. Client complaints, right? We're dealing with that side of things. Equipment issues. Our vendor communication, we love that, but we have to do those, and those take a lot of time to cultivate those relationships so that they're beneficial to our practice, but it doesn't allow us, it takes away from our time to lead. Coordinating all the meetings that we have, and sometimes we have meeting after meeting after meeting. And, again, all the paperwork and the payroll and the finances and all of that kind of reporting just takes a lot of time and energy away from being able to lead. Because if I'm spending 2 hours, 3 hours doing detailed reporting, I've kind of reached my mental capacity to go deal with then an emotionally led team conversation. So,
Okay. What about you, Debbie? What are your thoughts here?
Well, kind of like these guys, I think we give them everything. We hire a great management candidate. We give them a job description that tells them what they'll do, and then we give them everything else. And if they're a credentialed technician, then we expect direct patient care as a focus. And don't get me wrong, I have always loved when I can get a certified veterinary technician that's also, open to management and has some skills. But what I find is if they're in surgery, then somebody complains about inventory or the schedule's off. And if they're having admin time, then they're clearly just goofing off and they're the only person that can place a catheter. And then I think, well, then where's the training? Train everybody else to place a catheter. I think, but they can't train because they still have to be the only one in surgery and they still have to make sure the inventory got offered. I mean, we just give them so much. I kind of thought with this that training becomes one of the biggest areas of concern. I mean, there's some great um, technologies out there now that will create the training for you, that give you the training. And yet what we find is we give them these great training programs and then there's no accountability. So, Janine still can't place a catheter and she's been your vet assistant for 8 years. And it's like, well, that's just Janine. Like, well, then you're always going to be placing the catheter. But I don't think managers have to be the only ones training. And we kind of pull that on ourselves as like, throwing up your hands and saying, fine, I'll do it is just not the answer. And that tends to be like you got to the top of the food chain because you would do it all. And now you're unhappy because you're doing it all. It's like, make him do everything.
So I have a follow-up question, which isn't one of our burning questions. But you all brought up things that must be done, but are basically like busy work, paperwork, administrative duties. So I just want to throw this at you. How do you feel about um, managers, s- you know, taking a day and doing all those things from home? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I'll take that one. Sorry, Kenny.
No.
One of the things I see is that we have this shift in the workforce in general. And so you've got an old school mentality that says if you're not where I can see you, you're not working, which the last 5 years have proven to be not true. Um, and yet you want to do all these admin things while somebody's coming to tell you that you're out of microscope slides, or I don't know if you know, but Liz was mean to me. I'm thinking, I've still got to get payroll processed. But I mean, I'm a big fan of outsourcing. A lot of this, you know, angst that we take on ourselves could be outsourced. But I'm all a fan of saying, hey, one day, like the 4 days, come in, be with the people, talk them up where they need them, train them. But for the mind task, I need to not have somebody come in to ask me if I'm busy.
Katie?
And
I feel differently. I feel like managers should be there 5 days a week because we want to see it, feel it, hear it, all of the things. I've found in my experience that dedicating a few hours each day to admin was the best way for me to make that happen and still be in it. Um, I think that part of this is that we need to allow for more help and leads that are taught to lead and help the practice manager, and so delegation can happen, and then no one needs to not be in the office.
What about you, Susie?
Yeah, and I was waiting for the word, and Katie hit it on the head. So I do a lot of work in time management and delegation, and it's such an important concept that we don't talk about enough as we're training managers. And so I'm a fan of time blocking. So I agree with Katie. I like to see my managers in the practice, but I'm a fan of time blocking. So I'm going to take from 9 to 11 on Tuesdays, and that's my time. And my team is aware that that's my time, and they know that unless things are really, really like literally on fire and I just need to leave the building, they shouldn't be interrupting me. And they can navigate their own problems, but they have to be able to be given permission. And that's where the delegation comes in, that I have the authority to make a decision without bothering the manager, without bothering leadership. And so creating a level of leaders and delegating out some of these tasks that do need to get done, but they don't need to be done by the manager is really important.
I think that the time blocking is a great approach. And I know a lot of managers are like, but I have an open door policy. And it's like, but if your door is always open, it's always open to interruptions. And so I've encouraged a lot of managers to set office hours. Like I am available between these times, so that I have, an open door, but I also have to do those time blocks, and helping the staff to understand the why behind that really helps. I used to, my daughter had a Sunday event every week, and I drove by the office, dropping her off at that and picking her up, and I was like, man, that's 3 hours I've got to wait on her, and the office is right there. And so I would go on Sundays, and that was like my big 3 hour block to like get a lot of stuff done uninterrupted. So I wasn't working from home, but I was kind of doing a modified version of what all three of you mentioned, and that worked for me. So I think, and it freed me up to be on the floor, as Katie said, the rest of the week, and available to the people.
Brenda, I was going to throw in one thing too. Like if you're the only person that is allowed to call the plumber, kind of to Susie's point, it's like there's a time block, but they can't call the plumber because we haven't delegated like who the plumber is. It's like keeping a maintenance list. In our practices, we always had a patient called maintenance for the practice, and all the contacts were there because if the toilet's overflowing, someone needs to make it stop. It doesn't have to be the manager. So a lot of times we delegate in and talk, like we talk about it, but then we hold the special tools. Like if you're on vacation and you're the only person that knows where the screwdriver is to the autoclave, well, that's on you. Like share the resources.
So we
Absolutely.
need to delegate and then empower people. I
Yeah.
think is a big lack in our industry is we need to teach them how to do these things and then allow them to do it and not hold the key or the screwdriver to the autoclave. So I think we do fail at that a little bit in our field.
So my second burning question comes out of it, something I'm dealing with one of my clients, is that they're really trying to build that leadership team so that they can take some of the things off of the plate of the manager and have her available. But the thing that they are encountering right now, of course, there's bumps in the road when that happens, but she has become this emotional and operational catch-all. So, how can owners and that leadership team better structure support so that that manager doesn't always have to catch everything emotional and operational? Let's start with Susie.
All right. So I think that I just love this topic so much because I think when we have every issue flowing through one manager, we spend our days reacting versus leading or planning, right? Which I think is also really important. And so we kind of have become these emotional shock absorbers because we're just like, we get shocked and then we have to like reset. But I think, it kind of is back to basics, right? Number one, clarifying their role. What is the role that you want the practice manager to be playing? Like that job duty Debbie was mentioning too, and building a leadership team instead of solo leaders. There can be different arms to your structure so that if there is a client issue, maybe that doesn't have to go to the manager. If there is a vendor who comes in, maybe that's part of your time blocking. Vendors come in at a certain time. Um, but one of the biggest things that I'm seeing now is kind of defining decision authority. So we have a lot of leaders who, leaders without titles sometimes even, and we don't have a clear definition of what is their authority level for business decisions. So maybe clarifying that a little bit better and deciding where they can act independently instead of having to go to the owner doctor who may not be on site. Because I think that's the other roadblock that managers have with time of getting all of the things done is that they're hamstrung themselves, right? They don't have ultimate decision-making power, depending on their company structure. So making sure that we have clarity there and reducing the bottleneck of those decisions is a really good system in place that I think is a good place to start.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Debbie, what are your thoughts?
Well, kind of to what Susie was talking about, I was thinking about the managers, they can share the task. Like, I don't know how the marquee works. I don't need to know how the marquee works. Somebody else does. You can share the social media task. You can share the task. I like a level of supervisors and leads, but I find often we just pick a person because they have perfect attendance. I don't know why we pick them, but I don't know if they're qualified. Like, can you lead people? Can you get sure the tasks are done that have to happen? And sometimes I see that, but then what I hear is that managers, you said hamstrung, and I thought that's the same thing. Like, we have got people in place, we've empowered them, they've got skills, and yet sometimes owners and leaders think you're still the only person that can answer that question. It's like, no, I've sent this person to courses. Like, I know they can. Well, you need to do it. Like, yeah, I get it. Managers can only go so far when their hands are held like that. Delegating and using technologies that make sense for your practice. There's lots of great tools out there, but if it's not saving you any time on the people issue to deal with the people issues, then maybe it's time to revisit their value. I mean, I love them all, but I've had time over the years to think, you know what, this one makes no sense for us, and this one don't know how we could get by without it. So I think if I'm looking to prioritize how to use my time and my um, staff's time, then I need to know if it's really helping us. Because sometimes the details of checking on a technology is time sucking itself. Like, I don't want to read every single thing that ever came through on there. I presume that whoever I put in charge of it is doing that, but I should have had the conversation to explain the expectation to.
Thanks, Debbie. What are your thoughts on this, Katie?
So I think as far as the emotional portion of it, that's huge. I used to joke that I could probably get a license in therapy, jokingly, after all my years in practice management. But I think something that has become very important is having an EAP, an employee assistance program. And I think everyone should offer it and it should be used versus using the practice manager for that. And even having a plan, like if we have a private practice, making sure that the health plan allows for therapy and mental health, because people will go to that if it's offered to them. And it does take some of the burden off of the practice manager, especially if they have, say, 5 calls a month with the EAP line and it's something, the manager's busy, so I'm just going to call the line and talk to them. And I think that's really important. Because it's a lot. You take on a lot in everyone's issue. So I find that to be the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree.
One more follow-up question for you all. How long do you believe it takes to build a strong middle-level management team to take the load and burden off of the managers?
You're thinking more than a week then? Because, we gave the role. What's the problem?
Realistically, because
Yeah.
this is something that I work with a lot with our clients, and I think that sometimes I promoted them all, I gave them all job descriptions, and they went through a little bit of leadership training. They should be good to go, right? And that's not necessarily the case because you've got to build that strong team. So, what would be a realistic range of time, do you think?
Yeah. I think it's a trick question because I think we're always learning. And so it doesn't stop. There's no finite end to me, right? My middle managers are still learning and growing, and I'm developing them on a regular basis. But just to get them up and running, right, I think is really what we're thinking about here is honestly, I would want somebody who's been in my practice for a year, ideally. So they kind of really understand the culture, they understand the workflow, they understand what we're about. And I can see that they have lived and breathed our mission and our vision and our values because that's the kind of leader I want. And I don't think you can see that in somebody for 30 days, 60 days before you decide to put them in a leadership position. So I think we start too early for starters. But once you kind of get past that year mark, I think if you're dedicated and you're giving time to teaching them the leadership skills, I think 90 days, just like we would for any other position start, would be minimum, in my opinion, before I would let them kind of go on their own. And we think about how we bring in technicians and CSRs, we pair them with a buddy, and then we have mentorship after that. And so that first 90 days is really pivotal. So I think that that would be kind of my marker if I was looking at when would they be comfortable, right? And should be able to kind of stand a little bit on their own.
I would say similar. I'd look at that 6 months, but I think Susie hit something important. A lot of times we are in the interview stage and somebody shows a lot of potential either in a statement or their paperwork, and we're like, well, this is going to be the person to be the tech lead. And so we're all set with it. We've had some kind of nod to them and they're expecting that to be their role right in. But I need them to be there. I think that year in the practice is good. They need to know who the players are and what the conversations are. And a lot of times we start too soon, but we also make our expectations early on. All of a sudden, it's whatever, 30 days into a person that's been with you a year and a half, they're now the lead something. And, we check that off our box. Like, manager's like, sweet, I've got somebody doing it. And we're not making any time for mentoring the leadership point. We're happy to have handed off the task. I believe that relationships are going to be the key to 2026. Some of you have heard me say that 14 times this year. It's going to be clients, it's going to be team, and we're still talking about tasks for managers. And why are we frustrated? Because we're still talking about tasks when we can't trust people to do what they said they would do.
Thoughts, Katie?
Again, a little different. I think I'd like to get things done a little bit faster and I would be willing as a manager to commit myself for 6 weeks to everything with a new manager, and then letting them start to kind of go out on their own, because my experience has shown the longer I kind of hold them back, the more frustrated they get. They start doubting themselves. I might get frustrated that I'm still talking about it, and that's my personality. So I want to, set some goals in those first 4 to 6 weeks and then say, let's try it. I'm still here. Let's still talk about things if they don't work out great, but you need to kind of learn on your own as well. But then after that point, setting milestones, checking in. You can't just give up after the 6 weeks. You have to continue making the effort, and maybe less of an effort, but it's not just like done. So yeah.
Milestones. That just hits the mark on the head for me, because I was thinking about my leadership team in Indianapolis and the evolution there, and it was such a strong team. The big milestone where I knew like they've got this was I went on vacation, and it was the first time in years that I'd been on vacation and no one called me or texted me. And it was one of those things where I was like, is everything okay? But I held myself back. And when I returned to the practice, my HR manager came to me and he's like, how was your vacation? And I said, it was great. I was like, it was really kind of strange though, because no one called me. And he's like, that was our goal. And as a leadership team, they had said, our goal is not to call Brenda during her vacation. We can handle this. And that was a huge milestone for that team. So it took 2 years, but it was, like Susie said, it was an evolution. It was continued growth and them realizing that they could do it. So. Well, thank you all, and thank you for flying with us on Flight Plan Quick Consults. If today's insights helped you climb to new heights, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your crew. Until next time, keep your mission clear, your team aligned, and your practice soaring.